Welcome to Crazy Good Talks with Deirdre Van Nest. In this podcast, we help growth-oriented financial advisors, leaders, sales professionals, and experts stand out and own the room every time they speak. Deirdre will empower you to grab and keep the attention of any audience, live or virtual, make emotional connections with your listeners, and inspire them to take action. Join us on this journey where Deirdre will empower you to become a more confident presenter and knock it out of the park when you speak.
Stop juggling all those balls. Having your own business or practice doesn't have to be this stressful. You can create a self-managing company. And Deirdre's guest, Erin Botsford, knows how. She's done it with some crazy good communication skills that increase your credibility because they make you human.
I couldn't be more excited to have my guest, Erin Botsford, on the show today. So Erin and I met years ago. We were both speaking at an event, and it was exciting, first of all, because there's not a lot of women who are keynoting events. So she was like, I was like, another woman. So that was pretty cool. But when I saw her speak, I was like, I need to meet this woman. She's amazing. She's a powerhouse and super, super generous. So before I bring Erin on, let me just give you kind of just a few fun facts about her. So Erin is a top Barron, top 100 advisor in all categories: advisor, independent, and woman, which is just amazing. She successfully sold her financial planning practice back in 2017 and now provides advisors the ability to model her success through her Elite Advisor Success System training program. And I've seen it, and I can tell you it's amazing. I've had clients go through it and they absolutely love it. But here's one of the things I love best about Erin is that she donates half of the profits from her training company to support orphans in Africa. And I'm sure she'll talk a little more about this. Now, if you are not a financial advisor, because we know we have mission-driven entrepreneurs listening to the podcast, please don't tune out, because the strategies Erin is going to be talking about really goes across all business industries. I use the strategies I've learned from Erin, and I'm not an advisor. So if you own a business, this is for you. Welcome, Erin.
Well, thank you, Deirdre. I do want to point out that the first time you saw me, you came up to me and you said, well, I said, how was my talk? And you're like, well, it was pretty good. And I said, well, what do you do for a living? Well, I teach people how to give talks. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm in trouble. So as a result of that, I became one of your students, and the rest, as they say, is history.
History.
So I think, we got put together fortuitously, and it's been such a nice run and a great time getting to know you and being one of your students.
Oh, I agree. I've loved working with you, and I've loved the friendship that we have developed. And I know we share a lot of clients in common, so that's been really fun to just have someone amazing to refer my corporate clients to and my advisor clients. One of the things that I've always loved about you, Erin, that was very impressive, and I think this is one of the things that stood out to me when I first heard you speak, is that you say your business should not be your life. It should be the benefactor of your life. That is such a unique twist on business. Can you talk about what does that mean when you say that?
I struggled really badly. I became a financial advisor in 1989, and I was in Panama City, Florida, where the average per capita income was $9,000 a year. Try being a stockbroker in that environment. Then my husband, we moved to Dallas, Texas, and I had to start all over again. So I worked. I worked 7 days a week. I never took a day off for 7 years. And
wow.
It was not fun.
Yeah.
But no one ever taught me that life could be any different from that. I'll tell you how this came about, my epiphany, and you know the story, but it was in my 10th year in business, and I was ready to fail out. I was like, you know what? If I can't figure this out, I just want to quit. And so my branch manager at the time said, why don't you go get some business coaching? So I enrolled in a business coaching program, and I just embraced it wholeheartedly. Something happened that would forever, ever change my life. And that was on the third year. It was a 12th session.
And this was strategic coach, right?
Yeah, strategic coach.
And I'm in coach too. And I know a lot of our listeners are probably in coach.
Yeah.
So if you don't know strategic coach, by the way, check out strategic coach. It's amazing. Yeah.
Yeah. I was in strategic coach for 15 years. So,
can I tell you one thing real quick? Real exciting about strategic coach.
Yeah.
I just enrolled in Dan Sullivan's 10X program with strategic coach. So I'm excited. I think you got to work with Dan when you did it, but he doesn't do the signature program any longer. So I've not yet worked with him. So I'm excited to be in his program.
He was my coach all 15 years. Yeah, he's amazing. And you're going to love it. You're going to love it. Dan at the time asked us to all stand up and find somebody in the room to share our progress with. I got up and I saw this random guy standing there. And I said, hey, you want to do the exercise together? He goes, yeah. And his name was Paul. And I said, I wanted to go first because I was so excited about my progress over the 3 years. And so I said, hey, I'm going to go first. I'm Erin Botsford. I'm from Dallas, Texas. And I told him that 3 years ago, I was doing around $300,000 in personal production. And now I'm on target to do somewhere between 400 and 450. And I'm thinking to myself, like, woohoo, look at me. And you know the rest of the story. So then it's Paul's turn. He said, hey, I'm from Virginia. He was also in our business. And he said 3 years ago, I was doing 300,000 in production as well. And I swear to you, I looked at him and I thought, well, look at that. We're just alike. And then I tell people, Paul said the words I'll never forget. He goes, this year I'm on target to do 3 million in production. And he goes, I don't meet with any existing clients anymore. What I do is I go out and I, prospect and I sell the philosophy of our firm. And then I turn all my new clients over to build a whole team around me. And I was like, what? You went from 300,000 to 3 million in 3 years? He's like, yep. And of course I'm thinking, did I miss a coaching session or?
Yeah. Like, is there like a secret program that I didn't know existed?
It was crazy. Of course, then the bell rings. It's time to go back to our chairs. And I'm sitting there. I tell people it was like that ALS bucket moment challenge. I was like, what? I felt like I was just covered with water. And I'm thinking, how in the world did you do that? So we're supposed to be seated and I start stammering and I'm like, Paul, could I just please buy a few hours of your time? And he's like, yeah, sure. He goes, why don't you come spend the day with me and my team? I went home as fast as I could get back to Dallas. Deirdre, you'll know this. I made Bob, my husband, go with me. Now, Bob's an airline pilot. But I wanted him to understand if Paul said, well, in order to get that kind of success, you're going to have to divorce your husband, right, give up your firstborn child. I just knew there was going to be this big cost to it, right? Exactly. Fortunately, I got to spend one day with this very successful person. And truthfully, all he did was he changed the way I think about the business.
Yeah.
When I went home, I remember he gave me a book to read and stuff like that. And I went home and I wrote down this mantra was that I wanted my business. I didn't want my business to be my life. I wanted my business to be the benefactor that allowed me to have a great life.
Yes.
And that's where that started back, 20 years ago. I'm really lucky. I got back at the time I had one part-time assistant named Kaylin. And I remember meeting with her and I said, okay, Kaylin, here's the deal. I'm going to go out and bring in new business and you're going to do everything else.
And her reaction?
She was 20 thank God, she was 20 right out of college.
Right.
And her reaction was, okay. From there, we started. And 3 or 4 years later, I did 3 million and 4 million and 5 million. My business just kept growing. And it was just really, it's so much, just like flipping a switch in my head.
Yeah.
I think that's the piece that so many, not just financial advisors, but business owners, they get caught up in doing the work of the business instead of thinking like a business owner. And then they wonder why they can never step away. They can never take a vacation. They're just tied to their business.
So here's what we're going to do with this interview here, this discussion. I want to keep us honest. It's called Crazy Good Talk. So I do want to ask you some communication questions. I'm going to ask you that in a little bit, but I do want to keep on this business track because I know my listeners are thinking, oh my gosh, give me some nuggets, because I think a lot of business owners, and I've been here too, I'm in a big transition right now, are in that, how do I get out of the working in to working on? And it is a mindset shift. So once you make that mindset shift, like you made, what are some of the first few steps you took? And what would you recommend someone else who is in your situation, like now, right, where you were 20 years, take to start making that happen?
Right. Well, I want to first give an analogy because I think it helps. And that is that one of the things Paul and I talked about was, we said, Erin, instead of being in this business, just pretend that you decided to buy 4 McDonald's franchises. So you bought one in the north of your town, one in the south, one in the east, and one in the west. And so he said, in which one of those McDonald's franchises would you be in the back flipping burgers? And the answer was none of them, right? Because flipping burgers is the work of the business. So I really had to then put that into my own head. And one of the problems that I had was I always wanted to be the smartest person in the room.
Mm-hmm.
And the problem is if you have to be the smartest person in the room, then you have to be in the room.
Right.
And I remember going to she was a branch manager at the time. And I was telling her, my goal when I came home from that one day, I said, someday I want to have 7 conference rooms filled with clients of my firm. And I'm not in any one of them. Mm-hmm. And the truth is that's exactly what happened. I said to her, I've got to hire people and I've got to train them to do what I do. And I'm afraid to do that. What if they screw it up? I mean, you and I both know bringing on a new client, prospecting and bringing on a new client, that's the hardest part of the business. I certainly don't want somebody coming in after me and screwing it up.
It is scary. So let's talk about that for a minute. First of all, I love what you're saying about if you're the smartest person in the room, then you always have to be in the room. And so what I hear you saying is we have to be willing to let go some of our ego. I mean, there is ego tied in that. We have to be willing to let go of that. We have to be able to visualize an outcome that we want. How do you not only get over the fear of like, what if someone screws it up, but also find people that aren't going to screw it up? Like, I think it's a 2-part situation. Yeah.
Yeah. How many days do you have? One of the smart things that this woman, Susan, said to me, she said, Erin, if your people could do things, let's say you had those 7 conference rooms, and if your people could do things 65% as well as you, would that be good enough? And I had to go home and I had to think about it. And I thought, okay, well, if I had 7 conference rooms filled with people and they were 65% as effective as I am, well, I came back and I go, yeah, that would be good enough, right? Well, it turns out they were way more effective than even I was. Okay. So how did I find that? One of the things I started to do was, again, I wanted to train people myself because I'm a control freak.
Okay.
Starting with Kaylin, then we hired another person and another person. All I did was I segmented my clients into A, B, and C, and in that case, I had D clients too. Because when I first, got in the business, my gosh, I was this young girl, 29 or 28 years old. If they came in and if they could fog a mirror, they were qualified to be a client, right? So I had a lot of people had $10,000, $50,000, $100,000 with me. I had to come to the realization that if those are my C or D clients, if those people went away because this person screwed things up, I had to be okay with that.
Okay.
I wasn't having them meet with my A clients.
Yes. Got it. Okay.
They need to practice on the C and D. So here's what I did. I'll use the guy, Kyle. Kyle, starting on day 1, first of all, I always got him out of the University of North Texas. I got him out of college. I like to get him right out of college so I don't want people coming in with bad habits.
You want to mold them. Okay. So that's interesting.
So I could also get him really cheap rather than a seasoned professional. From day 1, okay, I had a 3-part process. Day 1, Kyle comes into every meeting with a C client, every single meeting. He takes the notes. He does all the follow-up. I just conduct the meetings, and that's all of year 1. So let's say we have 4 meetings in year 1. In year 2, we make a huge transition. Now, mind you, he's been in all these meetings, and he's also been in some of my B client meetings, my A client meetings.
And this is for a year. Okay.
For a whole year.
Wow.
But he's, as I said, he's doing all the follow-up, sending the paperwork, and he's learning. And what we would do is after every meeting, people are gone. I would say, okay, Kyle, tell me what happened in that meeting.
Yeah.
They had to articulate back to me, well, I noticed when you said this, they came back with that. And this is how you replied, right? He learned to overcome objections and things just by being in the room with me. But I wanted to see, did he pick it up? I didn't want to tell him what just happened. I wanted to know, did he pick it up? Year 2 was where the magic happened. First meeting goes exactly the same. I run the meeting, Kyle's in the room, but I suddenly just can't remember things. And I'll say, well, Kyle, do you remember about this? Or do you remember the cost of that? Or do you remember? And I keep deflecting my credibility to Kyle.
Yeah.
They're used to having him in the room, right?
Right.
And they're used to having him follow up on things. But now I'm deflecting and I'm passing on my credibility to Kyle.
That's brilliant, actually.
Thank you.
That's brilliant.
Meeting 2 that year. So it's a quarter later or however long later. Kyle and I switch seats.
Okay.
There's never an announcement made. Kyle just sits where I normally sat, and I sat where he sat. And Kyle runs the meeting. And the third meeting, I am conveniently late. The conveniently late is, and by the way, you and I both know I don't lie. I try not to lie. I would never say I got tied up in a meeting. I just say, I'm sorry I'm late.
Right. I'm sorry I'm late. And you were.
They don't
You were
need
just
to know why I'm late. They don't need to know what I'm doing. But I had a magic trick. And this was beautiful. So what I would do, I would walk in the meeting and I would look for a sign. The person, it was Kyle or Blaine or JP or whoever, there's many, many, many that came after Kyle. But the sign was, I would look for a pen. They would take their pen. And if they took the pen and they laid it on the right-hand side of their yellow legal pad or the piece of paper, what that said to me was, everything's going great. These people are happy. There's no reason for you to stay. But if they took their pen and they laid it across the top of their piece of paper sideways, I looked for it. They had some objections that I couldn't overcome. I could use a little help. You might want to sit down. So I would literally just wait for the sign. If I saw that they needed help, I'd go, hey, what are you guys talking about? Would you mind if I sat in? So I'd pull up a chair and then I would allow Kyle to then say, well, we were recommending that they put their money in X, Y, and Z. And, they have some questions about that. I'm like, oh, really? What are your questions? And I was able to then overcome the objections and get the business done. Anyway, that's how I did it. I started with my C clients or C/D. The next year it was my B. And finally, year 3, I all of my A clients. I ended up not meeting with any clients at the end. My last 5 years. What I did was I sold the philosophy of my firm. And I tell them, I had very famous Dallas Cowboys as clients. I had a lot of famous people. And I'm like, you know what? You just have to understand, nobody gets me. Okay. And why is that good for you? Because if you get hit by a Mack truck, I don't want you to worry like, oh my gosh, what happens to my money? What I did was I sold the philosophy of my firm. I did not sell me.
I love it. So I do want to ask you about, but I don't want to go there yet because there's so much here. We could talk for hours. And this is why you have the training course, because then people get you for hours, right? And I'm thinking I need to go back through it. So I do want to ask you about the role your communication skills have played, obviously, in selling the philosophy. We'll go back there in a moment. Okay. But there's just a few things that you said that I really want to highlight. So first of all, you wanted to make this thing happen, this 10X, like Paul did. I love that Paul story. I just think it's just so good and so rich. But you're probably kind of feeling urgency, but you took the time to train. What I hear you is being very patient. The fact that you spent a year, it shows a lot of patience. What you're saying is, don't expect someone to just overnight come in and like 6 weeks, they can replace you. Like, that's not how this works. Correct. This is strategic and this takes time.
Yeah, maybe, I don't know. That's the way I did it. Maybe you could get it done faster, but I'm such a control freak that I didn't want to leave anything to chance.
Yeah.
Most people in my business, at least, are control freaks.
Yes. In all the most beautiful ways possible.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Right? But it's difficult for those of us who are to get ourselves out of the room.
Well, absolutely. So here's one thing that came up for me. And again, I'm a business owner and I'm scaling right now. So I'm like drinking in everything you're saying. My one fear, and so I'm wondering if maybe my listeners are thinking this too, is you invest all this time into this person. And then what if they leave, Erin, like 6 months in or 18 months in, and you're like, oh my gosh, the amount of time. Can you just talk to that fear for a moment?
Yeah, because I had people leave. So I had 2 people leave within a month of each other. And I can't say it was devastating, because it really wasn't, because I had a big enough organization that the clients that they served, I assigned them to somebody else. And what I did was, one thing that's super important is that I did have everybody sign a non-compete, non-solicitation agreement. I paid $9,000 for that one document. And I actually give that document. All of my students get that document so they can use it. What I said to both of these people that left, because typically when they leave, they think they're going to go do what you do, right? They're going to become your competitor. At least that's the way it is in my business. Both of these people, I remember one came, she came to me and she goes, you're out there just whining and dining people and we're doing all the work and you're making all this money. I'm like, okay, you know what? And I told her, I said, I will be your biggest cheerleader. I will support you, but I will also defend that non-compete that you signed. And I told him, I said, here, one of them was I'll call her Susan. Susan, now you're going to go out and you're going to try and find new clients and you're going to have to hire people, right? karma is an interesting thing.
Yeah. Right. You don't want someone to do the same to you.
You don't want them to do. I said, I'm going to do you a favor. And if you even contact one of my clients, I said, I will enforce this non-compete. And trust me when I tell you, I can afford better lawyers than you can. I was very kind. I'm like, on the other hand, I want your success. I pray for your success, and I'll do everything I can as long as you don't start pilfering my clients,
Yeah.
Because you're going to find out the most difficult part of any business is prospecting and business development. And it's interesting. One of the two people that left me failed out of the business. The other one's doing marginally well. And I offered to help them any way they want. It's just don't steal my clients. One of them, the guy that's doing well, he asked me for breakfast one day. He said, this client called him and would like to do business with him. And in that particular case, he did the honorable thing.
Yeah.
There was nothing legally I could really do if a client called him.
Right.
Right.
Yeah. And you want people to be able to work with who they want to work with. It's not like you're trying to hold people hostage. Yeah.
To have two people leave me and lose one client over it, I thought that was pretty good.
That is really good. That is really good. And then I wasn't even thinking of that angle when I asked the question, but now I'm glad you brought that up. The angle I was thinking is just the amount of time and energy you invested in training, and then they wash out.
Yeah. Well, the other thing too, Deirdre, is I always had the clients get used to working with a number of my people.
Okay. So you were had enough people kind of going in the pipeline where you weren't depending on any one person to make or break your business, it sounds like.
Correct.
Okay. I think that's the lesson here is have several people that you're training at the same time.
Yeah.
So that if someone leaves, you're not like, oh my gosh, what do I do?
Well, I'll give you an example. And this is really important. So I had two people at the time. It was Kaylin and a woman named Laura and a part-time woman named Hillary. Okay. Hillary did all my insurance paperwork or whatever. Laura's husband got brain cancer. Now his business, he was a mechanic or something, and they fired him. The guy gets brain cancer. They fire him. So I had him working for us. I was paying him $10 an hour to file or whatever. Now this was 20 years ago or whatever. At the end, he died, but he was in hospice care from January till Easter till April. And she was home with him in hospice care. She was my number one, my assistant. She made all my appointments. She did everything.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
And that was the time I was like, oh my gosh. But here's the good news about this, Deirdre, was this. What I realized was we had no systems and processes in our business.
Mm-hmm.
I'd call her and go, Laura, I wanted to send every client a birthday card, and I wanted it to arrive the day before their birthday. Well, how does that happen? And so Laura, she was a whiz. She could do everything, but she had it all in her head.
Ah, yes.
And this is a really good tip. I hired a college student. His name was Andy. He was the son of a friend of mine. So I hired him and paid him whatever. And I said, here's the deal. While she's out, by the time she comes back, I want to have a systems and process manual created.
I love it.
So Andy, what I want you to do, because I asked her, I was paying her full pay.
Right. Yeah.
While she sat by her husband who was dying. He was only 38. He was dying.
Oh, gosh.
And she wanted to have something to do. So Andy would say, Laura, how do we send a birthday card? And it's got to be down to where do we buy the cards? How do we get postage? She would type up how she did things. And then if Andy could do it, then I had a system and I had a process. So really and truly hiring that college kid to ask the questions of how to do things. Now I had a systems and process manual by the time she came back. Now it had to be changed and updated with every broker dealer change or anything I made. But at least I had that. I can tell you another reason that any business owner wants to have a systems and process manual is because you don't want any employee to be able to put a gun to your head and say, Deirdre, you better give me a $10,000 a year raise or I'm leaving. And they leave with everything in their head.
Yeah,
you can't afford that.
No, that's awesome. And so many of us business owners, we're kind of like flying by the seat of our pants, shooting from the hip. We're quick starts, right? If you know the Colby and visionaries, and we're like, let's just do our thing. And the process stuff can go by the wayside. So that's something that my company has spent the last year really getting in place are these SOPs and really creating them. So no, I appreciate that. Okay.
Well, and I want to say one final tip
Yeah.
on that. What I did was once I had it, then every new employee, their first year quarterly bonus was based on them updating the systems and processes. Yeah.
That's so good. I love how you think, Erin. I love how strategic you are. Okay, let's talk about, you are. So let's talk about communication for a little bit. So let's go back to, you have the firm's philosophy, which I love that. Your job is to sell it. How important is you being an effective, emotionally engaging communicator in being able to sell that philosophy? Talk to us about that.
Well, as you know, it's everything. You teach it. I was kind of lucky.
You know what? I got to say something. I feel like not every business owner, not every advisor, and not every entrepreneur, I don't think they get that the communication is everything. Like, I still feel like there are people who are like, I've been talking since I was born. Do you know what I'm saying? Or I've been writing since grade school. It's really not that big a deal. So I'd love for you to speak to this from your experience at the level of success you've achieved. Why is it everything?
Well, I can tell you from personal experience, this whole idea of being emotionally engaging, what that means is part of it is telling your story. Where did you come from? How did you arrive here? And what makes you a good fit for working with this client?
Yeah.
Now, I was emotionally shut down for many, many years. As you know, my personal story, I was raised in poverty, real poverty. My dad died when I was 11, left my mom with 6 kids and no money. And then when I was 16, I was on my way to work at McDonald's. I was involved in a car accident. I hit a guy on a motorcycle. He was killed. I was charged with manslaughter. I went through a criminal trial, then a civil trial. It was just a horrific time in my life.
Yeah.
And interestingly enough, Deirdre, then I met my husband, Bob, in high school. We got married. He became an Air Force pilot and was like, off we go into the wild blue yonder. And then 10 years later, I end up in this business. Now, I wanted to forget everything that had happened in my life.
Of course.
And I didn't want anybody to know I'd been raised in poverty, in the projects. I didn't want people to know I'd gone through a criminal trial and tried to commit suicide, not once, but twice. I mean, I had some baggage, big baggage. Okay. So I tried to buy the nicest suits and the nicest shoes and the nicest car and drive up. And I wanted to impress them with my stuff.
Like you were trying to cover it up almost, right?
I was embarrassed. I was ashamed of my.
Oh, Erin.
So what happened was this. I'm doing, I don't even say marginally well. I'm in business. I'm in business like 3 years.
Yeah.
I'm never going to tell my story. I wanted to bury it so deep you can even imagine. And then these people came in, Deirdre. I was a stockbroker, A.G. Edwards. I'm like the next broker up. These people come in and he's getting ready to retire from a pharmaceutical company. And they're just distraught because here they've worked all their life. They've saved all their money. And their son was driving a car in their name and he hit a motorcyclist and the motorcyclist was killed.
Oh, Erin, seriously, obviously God, that was a divine connection. I mean, what are the odds, right? Could have been anyone that.
I was like, no.
Yeah, this is not happening.
We're not going there. And I was shaking inside. And I was like, what do I do with this information? Because they were like, he's suicidal. He's this. And it was like, you and I know God did bring those people to me.
Yeah.
Because for the first time in 12 years or whatever, I said, I understand what you're going through. I understand. And then people are like, oh yeah, right.
Right.
And then I tell my story and these people they literally leapt across the desk to hug me. I mean, somebody could relate to what their fear was. They were afraid they were going to get sued and lose everything they'd worked so hard to build. They were afraid their kid was going to, end up in jail. There were all these fears. And they were talking to somebody who had been down that road and that path. And I survived. And I survived to tell the story. What was interesting, Deirdre, is nobody told me. I didn't know how I became an effective communicator, but eventually I told my story all the time.
Yeah.
Why? Because what I learned was people by people. Everybody has gone through, if you're over the age of 22, you've gone through something typically, right? My clients were usually in their 40s, 50s, or 60s. They'd had miscarriages and they'd gone through divorces and they'd had people die around them. And goodness sakes, with COVID, I mean, all this stuff has happened. And all people really want to do is they want to work with something and they want to communicate on a personal level.
Yes. Yes.
And to the degree you can do that and not be manipulative about it, but I mean, when I wanted to work with you, I want to know where you came from. And I think so many advisors in particular, some of the people that I've met along the way, is they think that by showing up in the Mercedes and the Rolex watch, somehow that makes them credible. And it's really by being human. Because let's face it, Deirdre, in my business, managing money is not all that hard. I mean, my business is not hard. You turn it over to a money manager and the markets go up and it's not rocket science. I'm not a surgeon that takes years and years and years to figure out how not to cut that artery. But I do know that individual customers, clients want to work with real live people.
Yeah. I always say you want to be a person first and an advisor or business owner second. And if they don't see the person, and especially today, I feel like the landscape has changed, Erin. I feel like maybe 20, 40 years ago, it wasn't as important, but today people want that vulnerability, that, appropriate for the business environment, that authenticity, that connection. And I feel like you were, and you probably didn't even know you were a trailblazer at the time, but I think you were probably one of the first advisors, quite honestly, who was sharing their story, because you started doing this right decades ago. And I know I've been preaching that message in this industry for the last 12, 13 years. And it's just in the last maybe 1 or 2 where now people are saying, yes, Deirdre, we're in. Like, it's taken a long time for people to go, okay, we see how important this is. But you've seen that.
I took it one step further too, in that I tell people, because I have a specific part of my process, it's called my visions and values conversation. And when I'm doing my initial approach talk, when I meet with them the first time, I tell them, okay, this is my process. I'm going to have one entire meeting with Mr. and Mrs. Smith, and I'm going to ask you a lot of questions about you. I'm going to want to know about where were you born and raised? Tell me about your mom, your dad, your brothers, your sisters, your nieces, your nephews, and then your children. What I'm looking for is potential train wrecks. What could come along and disrupt your plans to have a wonderful retirement or whatever your goals are? Think about this. I have one meeting, and before I ask them to, basically, I say, undress in front of me.
Yes.
Tell me everything about that personal stuff in your world. How dare I ask them that?
Yes.
And to me, it's super important to know. I want to know, do they have to feel a moral obligation to help their brothers or sisters if they get cancer? Do they have a moral obligation to put nieces and nephews through college? I mean, those have financial implications. I want, as a good advisor, I want to know if that stuff's hanging out there. But how dare I ask these personal questions unless I used to say, I get naked first. I mean, I undress first and say, here's my baggage. Here's everything that I had to deal with. Yep. I tell them that when my older sister got cancer at age 70, she was deaf. She has a mental acuity of a 10-year-old. Okay. I paid for her alternative cancer treatment. I was able to do these things because of money. I want them to see the benefit of having a lot of money. The benefit of all the work they did was what they can do with it, who they can help, because money of it in and of itself is just a tool. I want to make that tool something that they can use to help the people and the causes and the things they care about.
Well, absolutely. And one of the things that when I'm training advisors is I talk about flipping the script, right? In the industry, the script has been, you don't talk about yourself at all. You ask questions. And I say, how about you actually share something appropriately vulnerable that relates to them and what you're doing first. You show your underbelly first. It's sort of like the dog, right? The alpha, like when the dog is not the alpha, they kind of show their underbelly, and then maybe someone else will show their underbelly, but it's like your version of undress. Like, you show it first and set the tone, and they're going to be a lot more comfortable to be vulnerable also. So one of the things that I recommend is when you're in a meeting with someone, you sit there and you first sit down together, whether it's online, on Zoom, or in person, and you do sort of the nice chit chat. And then it's time to call the meeting to order. And instead of, okay, so tell me about you, or what brought you here, that kind of thing, you say, you know what? I'm so excited you're here, and I'm excited to learn all about you. I'm excited to learn about your values, your goals, your dreams, your fears, your hopes. And you might have some questions about what I do, but what's more important about what I do is not what I do, it's why I do it. So before we jump in to talking about you, do you mind if I take like 2 to 3 minutes to tell you why I care about you and why I'm thrilled that you're here? And then, of course, they're going to say yes. And then that's what when you share what I call your why story, you might call it the founder story, right? That's when you share that story. And then you'd say something like, so that's why I'm here. What made you want to invest the time to talk with me today? I want to learn about you now.
Right. Totally.
And you've totally set the stage differently than if you just jump into this very heady question and you ask them to expose themselves to someone they don't even know.
To me, it's like, how dare you do that? I would never ask somebody to do that unless I was willing to go first.
Yeah, totally. So let me ask you this. Talk about, because we've talked about this, the role that presenting in front of groups has played in your business from when you first started to till you sold. And even now you're a keynoter and trainer. So having these like really great group presentation skills, being able to present in front of people, because that's one of the things that I'm obviously known for and that I help business owners and advisors do, is become crazy good speakers who are amazing at presenting in front of people. Why is that so important, Erin? What's it done for you?
Well, all I can say is I wish I had known you 30 years ago, because I built my business doing public seminars. There was a long period of time, I averaged 6 seminars a month. And I was very lucky but I worked my tail off, and I would do daytime seminars at the public library and then pray for rain, because if it rained, the husbands wouldn't play golf. They'd actually come to the library I had all kinds of,
I love it.
Rationale, and I fumbled my way through it for many, many years. And truthfully, even fumbling my way through it, I did okay for, I always say I did okay for a girl. But if I had any training, and there wasn't any, you're the first person I've ever come across. And how long have we known each other? I don't even know. 10 years or whatever.
5 years.
Oh, really? I thought it was longer than that.
I know. Yeah, probably about 5 years or so. Yeah.
I would have given anything because I was just fumbling around. The miracle is that I think people trust me.
Yeah.
But it really was a miracle. Because I had no speaking skills. I just went up there and put it out there. I had a mentor. His name was Hal. God love him. I would go to his seminars and pretend I was his assistant. And he let me just copy his stuff, and his stuff was good. But if I had to do it over again, I would have never give that same seminar that I gave. It was very heady. Like you said, it wasn't emotionally engaging. It was just data.
Yeah.
But back then you could get by with it.
You could.
You don't remember the time that in the old days when I first started, the whole idea of having Morningstar or any data about a stock or a mutual fund, we owned that.
Well, that's true. No one could find that on the internet. There was no internet. So actually people were really like, wow, I need this information. Now the key is everybody has access. So you have to give the information what I call curb appeal. You've got to dress it up and bring it to life so that it's yours and it sounds different and more exciting than what they can just Google online.
Totally.
And then what role do you feel like your speaking skills have played in your ability to transition to a keynoter who and a trainer in the industry?
Well, lucky for me, by the time I transitioned, I had met you. Because you really did help me a lot in that. Before I sold my business October 2nd, 2017. And so that was 4 years ago. And before that, Deirdre, I wasn't doing a lot of keynote. I was asked, because I was a Barron's top 100 advisor in all categories, I kind of had a mantra. I was going to give back to my industry, and I would do one speech a year.
Okay.
If I had to, because what I felt like I was doing was training my competitors.
Yeah, got it.
What happened was in 2015, I had written a book called 7-Figure Firm, How to Build a Financial Services Business That Grows Itself. So that was 2015. I thought, well, I want to make sure I'm telling the truth. So I took 6 months off in 2015. I went to India for a month. I went to Asia, China for a month. I went to Africa for a month, and I took the summer off. And lo and behold, 2015, my company we had a record year.
And you're gone for 6 months. That's amazing.
I had worked myself out of a job. Right then, I started getting asked. And very next year, I started getting asked to give industry speeches. And at the time, they were paying like at the $10,000 a speech or whatever it was, 6-7 years ago, 2016. And I still didn't want to do it. I was like, you know what? $10,000, I could call a client and make $10,000. I don't want to get on a plane because it's never a 1-hour speech. It's a day to do it, a day to travel back, 3 days out of your life. I'm like, I've got grandkids. I'd rather go spend time with grandkids. But, and I know we're going to talk about this, I went to my husband, Bob, and I said, what if every time I got on a plane to give a speech, what if we gave 50% of that money to our orphanage in Africa? And he goes, oh my God, that'd be great. So suddenly I had new purpose to get on.
Yes, I love this. Yep.
That's how a lot of this got started. And the idea of giving 50% of my money away became very intriguing and a lot of fun. And so I started giving industry speeches a lot. Then I met you and I felt like I was getting better and better. I sold my company and now I give industry speeches a whole lot.
It's more than one time a year now, Erin. Okay. So as we're moving in the home stretch here, tell us what you're doing now and tell us, how can people find you? How can they work with you? Because I'm sitting here, like literally, this has been the fastest, probably like 40 minutes of my life. It feels like 5 minutes. And I'm sitting here going, okay, Erin, I want more. I want more. I want more. And I'm guessing my listeners are thinking the same. So how do they get you and have you mentor them?
If they go to erinbotsford.com, so www.erinbotsford.com, just my name, they can find out all about my training program. What I do is I take people through a 6-month training program. Literally, I send you an email every week and say, now study this. And it's about, if you can take 45 minutes to an hour and a half, 2 hours a week. And I tell people, just get up early for the next 6 months, get up at 5:30, listen to me for an hour in the shower or on the treadmill or whatever, and then get dressed and go to work. In the next 6 months, I can completely transform. If you're a financial advisor, I can completely transform your business. You can learn everything I know to build an amazing business. One thing I'm known for is to help advisors move up market. I'll give you an example. One of my students, her name is Carolyn. She's been in the business 25 years. Her average client was around a $3 million client. She went through my course and she said she had an opportunity to get in front of a $30 million business owner. And she said, Erin, even if I'd had that opportunity last year, I would have never gone to that guy or approached the guy because I didn't know didn't know what to do in that situation. I wasn't to that marketplace. But she said, I binge watched your secret. I call it my secret sauce. And that is what to say, exactly what to say when you get in front of whatever kind of prospect it is. If they're a lawyer, a doctor, a business owner, an executive, these are the things that you should say. And mine is very prescriptive, right? It's not coaching, it's prescriptive. Say these words and they will say yes, right?
Yes.
She got there. One of my mantras is if there are two people in a couple, both people have to be there before you do your, I call it my approach talk. Well, the wife wasn't there. So she knew though, she got the wife on a Zoom call. So the wife was there. She did her approach talk. And the next day she said, I went home and I just prayed, and she said the next day the guy called and said, hey, can I bring by a check for $15 million? And she goes, yep, I'll be at the office. And 3 weeks later, she also got his $40 million business partners.
That's amazing, Erin.
That's how effective this training can be. And then after 6 months, then you can choose to enter. I call it mastery. And every month we get together. And what I do is I also get on a monthly call. So it's a joint call. Those usually last an hour and a half to 2 hours. And I answer every single question. And I always tee up one business lesson and one, what we call a disturbing track, how to disturb your clients. Because I'll say this one thing and then I'll be quiet. Clients going to a financial advisor or hiring a financial advisor is akin to going to your dentist. Okay. Typically nobody seeks one out. What has to happen is they typically have to have a triggering event in their lives to seek out a financial advisor. So they may be getting a divorce, a parent may have died, they're planning for college education, planning to retire. So my thing is, I don't want to wait around for that triggering event to actually happen in their lives. So my approach is I use what I call disturbing tracks, and I create the triggering event in their mind to get them to work with me right now before maybe the negative thing happens. That's what I teach my advisor students. Take 6 months and then pretty much everybody stays on because the next part is all about mastering your skill. I can teach you everything in 6 months, but you're not going to become a master of anything. It's like going to the gym, right? You're not going to become a master unless you really keep going.
You have to apply.
Yeah. And you may not have a business owner client in the first 6 months, but somewhere along the line, next year, you're probably going to run into a business owner. I want you to know exactly what to say to get that business.
I love it. I love it. So financial advisors, if you want the opportunity to really sit at the foot of a master, like someone who has achieved extraordinary success in your industry, this is amazing what you're doing, Erin. And what's even cooler is that, again, half of what you're earning is going to support these kids in Africa. So thank you so much for not only being willing to give back to the industry, because you could ride into the sunset right now. Like you're fine, but you're wanting to give back to the industry and you're wanting to give to people who really need that help. So thank you for doing both of those things. Okay, one more time, where can people reach you? And then if you have, I'm going to put you on the spot, one piece of advice, whether it's an advisor or business owner. So again, I have a similar business model to yours, even though I'm not an advisor. So think of what you might say to me, like, what's just one piece of advice you would give that someone could even implement in the next 3 days? I'm really putting you on the spot here. Oh my gosh. To either make a shift in how they think or how they do something.
First of all, they can reach me at www.erinbotsford.com. It's ERINBOTSFORD. So thank you for doing that. One piece of advice, Dan Sullivan has a saying that I love. And I'm for my 50th birthday, my friends inscribed a cup, a plastic cup. And it says, always make your future bigger than your past. Having my future bigger than my past. And that's harder to do especially as you get older.
Yeah.
How to make your future bigger than your past. The way I feel like you can do it is always through contribution. So to me, the best advice I would give somebody is sit down and write out all the things. If you had $10 million in your bank account right now, and you didn't need it, and you didn't need any of it.
Yeah.
What would you do with that money? What would you do? What kind of a difference could you make in the world? Who could you help? What causes do you care about? Because what's interesting is it's like, as you put it out there, the universe responds and you end up with that stuff.
I love it.
If you don't think big, it'll never come to you. There's those laws of the universe. And so the larger you think, then it sets in motion what you need to do to get there.
I love it. I love it. I love it. Erin, if I was with you, I wish I was with you. I'd give you a big old kiss and a big old hug right now. Thank you so much for being here. This was amazing. I mean, this was such a beautiful conversation. You gave so many amazing strategies, and I am grateful. I'm grateful to you.
I'm grateful for you too.
Thank you for listening to the Crazy Good Talks podcast. Click the subscribe button below to be notified when new episodes become available. The information covered in this podcast represents the views and opinions of the guest and does not necessarily represent the views or opinions of Accelerated Performance, LLC. The content has been made available for informational and educational purposes only.